Y'all, that song was amazing. Wasn't that amazing? Seriously, unbelievable. Also, I learned something from Matthew this morning that when I come up to preach, I just say, this could be really good or really bad. So buckle up, you know? And then if it's like anything above bad, you're like, oh, you know, it wasn't as bad as he said it could have been. And then we're good. We're good to go. So we are in this series right now called Interrupted, and just talking about how some 2,000 years ago that Jesus stepped into time and he interrupted the world for all of mankind. And as I was thinking about Interrupted, I thought it's pretty low-hanging fruit right now for a sermon illustration to say, y'all, I'm 7 weeks away from having my first baby. Yeah. My life is about to be massively interrupted, all right? Big time interrupted. So this is absolutely a true story. We have entered the stage where we have to take a bunch of classes and do like hospital visits and all that good stuff. And one of those classes that I did not know was a thing was baby CPR class. Did not know that was a thing. That's a thing. When I found out about all the classes that I had to take, I may or may not have been a bad husband and been like, oh my gosh, we got to take a bunch of classes. And then 2 weeks ago, something happened that kept me from complaining, okay? This is real. Someone gave us a gift. They gave us this is bad, a kitty cat advent calendar. That's a thing. And Cadvent calendar, if you will. Anyone? Yeah? All right. So you could take my man card now. I can't believe that I have a cat advent calendar, but we do. And you, when you open up this Cadvent calendar, every day there is a different treat for your kitty cat. So day one of Advent, Mr. Kitty, I was giving him the treat from the Cadvent calendar. I'm just going to say Cadvent calendar as many times as I can because it's awesome. If that's trending in the woodlands at the end of this sermon, I'm in and I've succeeded. So we open it up and I give Mr. Kitty the treat, and Mr. Kitty proceeds to start choking on the treat. And I go into full-blown panic mode of how do I save my cat's life. So naturally, the first thing I do is I Google kitty cat Heimlich maneuver. And if you think I'm kidding, look what popped up on Google when I searched this thing. At the bottom it says, how to help a cat when no vets are available. Thank you, Google. And then we ended up like watching YouTube videos of cat Heimlich maneuvers, which I didn't know was a thing. It's a thing. And Mr. Kitty ended up not dying. It was good. But it was at that moment that I realized we're going to do baby CPR class, all right? Like if I am Googling kitty cat Heimlich maneuver, we are going to baby CPR class, all right? And then, so fast forward a little bit, last Sunday, I had to go we did our like hospital visit walkthrough. So I will just give you a disclaimer. Hospitals in and of themselves already make me a little bit queasy. I don't know what it is. Well, I do know what it is because I know what happens inside of that building. It doesn't matter how nice you try to make it look. I know what's happening on the inside. So I already get a little bit queasy. And we get to this hospital, and the person who is doing the walkthrough with us, the nurse, she's like this really sweet lady, big smile on her face, and she has like just this most amazing voice ever. It sounded like Casey Kasem, like radio DJ, right? And but no amount of smiling in like pleasantries is hiding the fact that she's like talking about the NICU room and that they have like 23-week-old babies in there being nursed back to health. And then at that moment, I realized we're 31 weeks pregnant. We could have a baby at any moment. Already queasy. Then that dawned on me. I get a little more queasy, all right? Then she just starts talking about more stuff. Won't go into detail. I'll spare you the details. All I can tell you is that by this point, I'm sweating a little bit, and I legitimately am having inner dialogue, and it's like, if I have a heart attack, at least I'm in a hospital, right? Like at least the nurse can help me in this moment. So true story, we're continue the walkthrough and I'm thinking, okay, we're about to walk into a room. There's gonna be chairs. I probably just need to take a seat. As if on cue, we walk into the room and she goes, hey, there's a few chairs and they're obviously for the pregnant women. And I was like, yeah, obviously. Let me tell you what you can't do when you're not pregnant. You can't look at someone who's 8 months pregnant and say, ma'am, can I sit in that seat? I'm feeling a little queasy about the thing that you're about to go through. You can't do that. I would get smacked. So I'm like, all right, you got to get it together, dude. This can't happen. And then no joke, the girl next to me, she's 8 months pregnant, has to sit on the floor because she almost fainted. And a nurse had to come over and check on her. And you know what you can't do at that point? You can't be like, can you check on me too? You can't do it. That's like a Michael Scott moment, by the way, in The Office. Like, am I bad? Am I doing bad right now? And at that point, I'm like, dude, you need to suck it up. Like, you got to suck it up in this moment. So that is the stage that we are in right now. And the truth is, our lives are about to be wildly interrupted. And it all started to dawn on me last Sunday at the hospital. And it's an amazing interruption. We're so excited for our baby girl who's going to be here in about 6 to 7 weeks. It's amazing. But what's also amazing is that in this season, we celebrate that a baby would enter into the world 2,000 years ago, y'all, and he would interrupt everything. I mean, that's what we celebrate. That God would step into time, exactly what Rob just prayed a moment ago, would step into the darkness and shine a light that is everlasting. And that's what we celebrate. I mean, the greatest interruption the world has ever known. So week 1, Rob talked about Mary and the interruption that Jesus brought into Mary's life. Week 2, we talked about Joseph. And this week, we're going to talk about the Wisemen and the Magi. And I want to read from you just from Matthew chapter 2. We'll kind of read all of this at one time, and then we'll break down some parts of this story. Starting in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." This is maybe the first time in recorded history that men ever asked for directions. Anyone? All right, that is dad joke number 1. Buckle up for a ride. We're going to have more where that came from, okay? And I have to give credit where credit's due. My wife is the one who made that joke this week when I was reading this passage out loud. So kudos to Deanna. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." Spoiler alert, he's lying. He does not want to worship Jesus. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So this morning, we're just going to talk about who these wise men were and why it's important for us today. The first thing is this: there probably weren't just 3 of them, all right? They probably would have been in a caravan. Why? Because there probably isn't 3 people traveling about 750 miles with gold. There's probably a caravan of these people, and I think we get 3 because there were 3 gifts. And we also get 3 because of that Christmas song. You know that song? "We 3 kings of..." I don't know any other lyric in the whole song. Does anyone know that song? Like, for real, you actually know the lyrics to all that song? That's impressive. 3 of you. Sick. Greatest. I'll tell you something. I said that to my wife this week, and she knew every word to that song, and I had no idea. 11 years of marriage, still being surprised by my wife. She knew "We 3 Kings." But there was most likely more than 3. There was probably a lot. There's probably a caravan of these Magi, of these wise men who were coming to bring their gifts to Jesus. So what were these Magi? What was their profession? Well, scholars have a lot of different ideas of it, and a lot of it comes from internal evidence from the Old Testament and from the scriptures. But some scholars believe that they were astrologers, they were scientists, they were scholars, illusionists, fortune tellers, priests. And as the name suggests, Magi is where we get the word magician. But what we do know without a shadow of a doubt, just by looking at the Old Testament, is that these Magi, these wise men, usually worked very closely with the king, or they were in positions of nobility. These were men who were very knowledgeable, they were affluent, they were wealthy, and they were in positions of power. We know that they were very, very well off. Yet something inside of them, y'all hear this morning, despite the fact that they had everything that they could need or want, something inside of them said, there's something missing. That there is a void in my life, and I'm gonna drop everything that I have, and I'm gonna travel 750 miles to find the one true king. No position of affluence or wealth or knowledge or intellect was enough for them, because there was something in them that was missing. And they knew that Jesus was the only one who could satiate the deepest desires of their hearts. So growing up, I had a couple musical influences. And my first one, I was a big Beatles fan. I grew up, any Beatles fans in the room? Some Beatles fans, a few of you? Yeah, all right. So I pretty much became a Beatles fan because they're great, but also because all my dad ever listened to was AC/DC, and it made me want to shove a Dorito in my eye every time we got in a car. And I was like, for the love of God, play something else. And when he put on the Beatles, I'm like, oh, melodies are a thing. If you're an AC/DC fan, you're like, I'm never going back to Loft. God bless you. You're just a little tone deaf. I'm just kidding. That's my dad's favorite band of all time, y'all. It was a rough childhood. It was rough. So I grew up a big Beatles fan, and then when I was in high school, there was this musician who came onto the scene by the name of John Mayer, and I became a huge John Mayer fan when I was in high school. He released his first radio single was a song called Your Body is a Wonderland. It came out in 2003, and he won a Grammy for it. And I was like, man, I got to go see this guy in person. I got to go to his show. So in 2004, he was going to Tampa, Florida. I grew up in Sarasota, Florida. We were taking a drive, and that was my senior year of high school. And my wife and I were best friends. We were not dating, but we were best friends. And side note, I'm just kidding. She's not in the room, so I'll embarrass her from afar. I remember picking up Deanna that day, and she walked out to get into the car. And it was the first time, I don't know if you were ever in the friend zone with your now spouse, but it was the first time in the friend zone where Deanna walked out, and I was like, babe alert. And I was like, all right, she's cute, That was the first time ever. I think I told her that a little bit later. That probably didn't go very well. But we go on this trip, and we go to see John Mayer. It was an amazing concert. And then at the very end of the show, he said, I'm going to do a song for you that I just wrote with my band, and we haven't released it yet. And I was like, oh yeah, that's always exciting, right? When you're at a concert, you're like, I get the first look at this. And he starts playing this song, and it has stuck with me for years, because I remember in that moment, I was at a secular concert and felt conviction over the lyrics that he was singing in this song. And I just want to share a few of these lyrics with you. The song says this: something's missing and I don't know how to fix it. Something's missing and I don't know what it is at all. Friends, check. Money, check. Well slept, check. Opposite sex, check. Guitar, check. Microphone, check. Messages waiting on me when I come home. But how come everything I think I need always comes with batteries? What do you think it means? And I remember sitting there and going, I don't know if any of you can resonate with it, but here's the deal. I can resonate with that 15 years later. Because the truth is, there are times even now in my life where I go through seasons where I feel like I'm in the valley and there's emptiness in me. And for some reason, even though I know Jesus is the answer, I reach out to other things to try to fill these voids or this emptiness that I feel at different seasons in my life. I resonate with, how come everything I think I need always comes with batteries? And the truth is, I think we could all unanimously in the room say that those things get old after what, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we're left maybe with even more emptiness than we had before it. But for some reason, there's something in our humanness, in my humanness, that still reaches out to these things to fill these voids. But they're not permanent. They don't fill them permanently. And y'all, this morning, I think that is one of the greatest lessons that we hear from these wise men, that we see in the lives of these wise men. We know that they had affluence. They come with gold. They come with frankincense. They come with myrrh. They have these gifts that are worth so much. They are in positions of authority and power, intelligence. Yet there was something inside of them that said, the only thing that can satiate the deepest desires of my heart is this king who has been born. And they leave everything behind to go and find him, because they know that it's the only thing that can fill the voids in their hearts. Then we read in this story that they are wise men from the east. It's pretty vague, right? It'd be nice if Matthew gave us a little more detail, but all we hear is that they're from the east. And most scholars believe that this would have been in Babylonia, which is modern day Iraq. And there's a reason why they think that, but real fast, it's about 750 miles east of Jerusalem. This is not a short journey. They don't show up on Christmas night, all right? They're there far after Christmas night because they have to go on a long journey to find Jesus. But why is it important that they come from Babylon? Well, it tells us that these Babylonians, these Gentiles, not those in the inner circle of the people of God, not those that the prophecies were given to, were waiting for a king for centuries. The non-Jewish believers were waiting for a king and a kingdom that would be established for centuries. And we read about the Wisemen as far back as 600, 700 BC, and we read about them in the story of Daniel. And the story of Daniel is amazing. We'll only scratch the surface a little bit this morning, but we read this story about this king Nebuchadnezzar who's from Babylon, and he comes and he ransacks all of Israel, and he takes over the country, and then he starts taking these Israelites into captivity and bringing them to Babylon. And we read in Daniel chapter 1 that he goes out and he searches for those that are the best of the Israelite men. And he wants to make them a part of his inner circle. So he looks for those that are of good, like physical stature. It actually says that they're good looking, that they have a lot of knowledge and a high level of intellect. Rob Renfro probably would have been chosen out of them, you think? Pretty close. It probably says something about hair in there. It's the, I can't say pecs in a microphone. I can't, cool. That's got the head nod from Rob. Woo! All right. So they're looking for these Israelites, and we read about the fact that they picked Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They picked these Israelites to make them a part of their inner circle. And then you fast forward a little bit, and King Nebuchadnezzar, he has this dream, and this dream freaks him out. And as he has this dream, he first goes to the wise men, the astrologers, the Magi, to have them come interpret this dream. And here's how this goes down. It's in Daniel chapter 2. The king replied to the astrologers, or the wise men, the Magi, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble." Oh, cool. It's a little heavy-handed. And he doubles down and he says it another time, by the way. So what's amazing about this story, though, is that Daniel, this Israelite boy, catches wind of this. And remember, he is in the midst of his enemies. He is imprisoned by his enemies. And you know what Daniel does? He intercedes on behalf of the Babylonian Magi. It says that then he met with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they started praying for the Lord of heaven to reveal this mystery to them. And then Daniel goes to King Nebuchadnezzar, and he intercedes on behalf of these Magi and says, "Please don't put them to death. I have been given insight into what your dream is and what it means." And then Daniel proceeds to say that you had this dream, and we won't go into all the detail, but you had this dream about this statue that was made up of all different materials and metals. And all these different materials and these clay and the steel and the iron, they all are about earthly kingdoms. And then Daniel says this, "But then I saw a hand etch out a rock from the side of a mountain, a hand not made by human hands. And this rock would come and it would destroy these earthly kingdoms. And this rock would settle and it would be a kingdom that is immovable and it would never be shaken." In essence, there is a king who is coming, establishing a kingdom, and it'll never go away. So Daniel reveals this dream to him, and we read this in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. "In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed." You know what I think? I think these Babylonians for 700 years had been thanking the God of Israel for being spared by this Israelite, and they were hanging on to this prophecy. They were hanging on to this dream. They were passing on century to century, generation to generation about this kingdom that would be established, about this king who is coming. So then they hear that he may be here, and they leave everything behind to go and find and worship this king. And they were passionate and they were zealous in their search. They were passionate and zealous in this search. We read in verses 1 and 2 in Matthew 2. "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked. I want to pause there for a second. So some of your translations will actually say the word asking. That's a better translation of the Greek word there, because it wasn't like they just came to Jerusalem and they asked one time. There's actually a zeal and passion in them that they are knocking on all the doors. They are going all throughout Jerusalem and saying, where is the king? We know that he has been born and we want to find him. You know what's interesting? The people of God are not the ones who are urgent in their search. It's Babylonians, it's outsiders from 750 miles away that come into this town to awaken them of their complacency. But they are zealous and passionate, y'all. They keep knocking. They keep searching to find this king. And asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. All right, so before we move on, real talk for a second. You ready? This is going to be the most divisive part of the whole sermon, just so you know. Not the Bible part, this question. What do you think is the greatest Christmas movie of all time? The greatest Christmas movie of all time. You guys are like, oh gosh. Of course, there'd be a dude in the front row who says Die Hard. Oh, I just opened up a can of worms. All right. So any Elf fans? Are there Elf fans in the room? Yeah? My millennial is showing in that, by the way, because I saw that movie when I was growing up. Home Alone? Any Home Alone fans? Yeah. Christmas Story? It's a Wonderful Life. I'm only saying those two because I didn't last night and I got in so much trouble, okay? That's the only reason. Rudolph, the original Rudolph, claymation. I may or may not know every word to that movie because I'm a weirdo. My favorite Christmas movie of all time is Christmas Vacation. Christmas Vacation, yeah? All right. I want to point out that none of you have given me an ovation for anything I've said until I said Christmas Vacation, so sick. I'm going to go home and cry. It's going to be great. I love that movie so much. The made-for-TV version, by the way, just saying. I gotta say that, all right? The truth is, that's all I think I'd ever seen until I was 25, and then it was on Netflix, and I was like, they don't cuss. I've never seen that version of that movie. I'm going to be really honest with you. I've been trying to find a way to fit a clip of Christmas Vacation into this sermon for 2 weeks. I've driven Rob nuts, all right? And guess what? I fit one in. All right, you ready? Here we go. Here's a clip from Christmas Vacation. Play ball. Anyway, this is my Jelly of the Month Club hat, so everyone knows. I'm going to wear this for the rest of the sermon. It'll be the only time I wear a hat in a sermon for the rest of my life, but just wanted an excuse to wear my Jelly of the Month Club hat. No big deal. It's really cool. So there's no cool way to transition out of that movie clip, by the way. There's no way to do it, so we're just going to figure it out together, all right? So the wise men, they see this star, not a sewage treatment plant light. They see this star. They drop everything they have, and they go on a journey to find Jesus. In their zeal, in their passion, they are emboldened to go on this journey and find Jesus. Can I tell y'all what I haven't been able to shake all week that I think is just so interesting about this passage? Is that it doesn't lead them to the feet of Jesus first. They go on this search and it leads them 80 miles away from Jesus to Jerusalem. And I've just been praying over this and trying to seek the Lord after this. And I'm like, why this stop? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I don't know about y'all, but an 80-mile difference is a big difference. I miss an exit and I'm frustrated. Anyone? Except in Texas, because you have the U-turn lane and the feeder road, because God bless Texas, you know? That's not in other states, but it's great here. But it leads them on this 80-mile interruption. An 80-mile interruption. But what I find in this passage is that it doesn't snuff out their joy. It doesn't take away their zeal. It doesn't take away their passion. It doesn't take away their searching and their knocking and their asking. And y'all, this may be just for one person in this room today, but I think it's worth it. Maybe you feel like right now that you're in Jerusalem, that you're in a place that isn't your final destination. And maybe you're struggling with saying, God, why am I here? I don't really understand this interruption. I don't really understand why I'm not at the exit that I think I'm supposed to be at. But y'all, I want to encourage you not to lose heart. That God can use those interruptions. In this story, we see it to literally wake up an entire city of people to say, oh, the king's here. It wakes up an entire town. to think about this coming king who is there. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 says this, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Some translations say this, that nothing is wasted. That nothing is wasted. You may find yourself in a place right now where you're like, God, I don't get it. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why this detour. I don't know why this interruption. But y'all, I believe with all of my heart that the Lord does not waste those moments in your life. That maybe you are the only Jesus that your community will see. Maybe you're the only Jesus your home will see, or your workplace will see. But I promise you that nothing is wasted. So take heart, don't lose zeal, don't lose your passion, don't lose your joy. I think God used this interruption, this detour, to wake up an entire city from their complacency. It was the Gentiles, the outsiders that were emboldened, that were zealous enough to go on a journey to find Jesus. Not the religious elite, not even the citizens of Israel or of Jerusalem, but it was the unlikely wise men. And then their passion ultimately led them to the feet of Jesus. Read in verse 9, after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them, till it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country on another route. They bring Jesus these gifts, and the gift of gold, it's amazing that Matthew pretty much preaches a sermon just by these gifts. Because gold would have been a gift that you would bring a king. It signified the kingship of Jesus, that they had found their king. They bring him gold. Frankincense was an incense that was used in the temple back then, and this incense signified divinity. It would have said gold, that Jesus is king, frankincense, that Jesus is God. And then myrrh was used for a bunch of different things. It was an incense, it was also medicinal, but its main usage was a burial ointment. And it would have said this, that Jesus is humanness, that Jesus is going to die for the world. So right here, we actually have like the gospel presentation on display. Gold for a king, frankincense for a God, and myrrh for a man. That's what we see in this story. Can I be a little honest real fast? I think it'd be a little weird to be the guy who brings myrrh to Mary, right? Like, hey, happy newborn, here's some burial ointment, right? Like, you'd be like, this is just a little bit of a weird gift. Have any of you ever gotten a weird gift on Christmas? Any weird gifts? Anyone? First of all, how do you do your Christmas presents? Do any of you do Christmas Eve? Any Christmas Eve? Or you do one present on Christmas Eve? Some of you? Okay. How many of you open your presents all at the same time? Anyone do all at the same time? That's savage, by the way. Like, if you have a family, like, someone's getting hurt in the middle of that, right? How many of you do one at a time? You just go around one at a time? That's the introvert's nightmare, is it not? Like, if you're the person who's like, you show the same level of excitement with a pair of socks or a big screen TV, and you're just like, thanks, and you just feel so awkward. It's like the most awkward thing. So I'll tell you, we do one at a time, and the most awkward gift that I've ever received in my life, I was a high school freshman, and it got around to me, and I opened up a book, and I like books, so that's fine. The title of the book was How to Control Your Anger. Thanks, Grandma, you know, and it's never left me to this day. So, and here's the problem with that. You can't get angry. You can't be like, I'm ripping this book up, it's going in the fireplace, you know? Because then you're like, well, proved your point. And then you also can't say thank you, because then you're actually saying like, maybe I need it, you know? So it's like, what do? You're between a rock and a hard place. How to control your anger. Thank you, Grandma. PTSD, you know, bringing years later, 2 decades later. Gold would have signified the kingship of Jesus. Frankincense would have signified that Jesus is God. And myrrh would have signified that Jesus came as a man. Really the gospel presentation. So these affluent wise men from the east have their entire lives interrupted by the birth of Jesus. And in their passion and their zeal, they go on a journey, and they will stop at nothing to find and worship him. And y'all, that's where this story leads us. That's how it concludes. It concludes that they go on this journey. I'm guessing they were probably tired. They were probably weary. And what do when they finally make it to the feet of Jesus? They bow down and they worship him. And y'all, I believe that is the only appropriate response when we make it to the feet of Jesus. I think that is the only appropriate response when we enter into the presence of the Lord. That every time we do, there should be something in us that says, I'm going to give you my gifts, I'm going to give you what I have, but I'm going to give you myself. That I'm going to bow before you and I'm going to worship you. Y'all, I've been the worship leader here at the Loft for over 5 years now. Over 5 years. And I'm just telling you now that my biggest prayer for this community has always been that we would be an impassioned people who are set afire for a love for Jesus. That when we would gather in this space, that this space would be holy, that it would be set apart, that this wouldn't be just something we mark off our checklist for the week, but when we would meet in the presence of the Lord, that we would then respond as worshipers. That's been my prayer for 5 years, that we would see just something happen when we gather in this space as a community. Why? Not because of anything that we can do up here or the lights and the sound and all that's really fun. And y'all, I love it so much. And not that Rob is one of the greatest communicators I've ever heard in my life. No, none of that. Because why? It all is moot without the presence of Jesus. All of it. It means nothing without Jesus. So my prayer for us is that we would not worry about what the people around us think, but we would be passionate for Jesus. That y'all, if you feel like you need to bow down and fall on your face, do that. If you feel like you need to go to these prayer stations and write a prayer for us to pray over you, do that. If you need to find someone around the room to pray for you, do that. If you want to lift up holy hands, as 1 Timothy says, do that. But that when we encounter Jesus, I pray that our response will be that of worship. Let's pray together. God, thank you so much for this opportunity we have to gather as a community, to gather as a family. God, I pray this morning that we just learn so much from the Wisemen and their journey. That God, our eyes would be open to see your glory that is leading us. That God, maybe there are people in this room today that they feel like they are at the wrong exit. They feel like there has been a detour. And God, I just pray that you would give just a supernatural amount of zeal and passion in their lives. That God, they would not lose heart, but they would know that right where they are at, that God, you can use them. So God, I just pray that you would strengthen those people who are in those seasons right now. And God, I pray that as a community at the Loft here and at the Woodlands United Methodist as a whole, that we would be passionate people for you. That God, when we encounter you, I pray that our response would be that of worship. That we would give you our all. That we would be a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to you. That we would give all we have. God, we thank you for the season that we celebrate, that you would step into time to meet with your people. That you are a king, that you are God, and you stepped into time as a man. That here we are 2,000 years later, the aftermath of an empty grave, celebrating that death could not hold you down, and we would be respondent in our worship for you. It's in Jesus' name we pray.